This is E&P Reports, a service of Editor and Publisher magazine. Since 1884, the authoritative voice of news publishing. And hi once again, Mike Blinder, publisher of E&P magazine. And by now you likely know about the groundbreaking lawsuit taking place as HD Media, a family-owned newspaper company in West Virginia, has filed a federal antitrust suit against the two tech giants, Google and Facebook, to try to level the playing field. Lee Wolverton, who is an integral part of this lawsuit, Vice President of News and Executive Editor of HD Media, will be joining us in our dialogue, along with one of the lead attorneys, a name you may be familiar with, Paul T. Farrell Jr., because if you've been following any of the major legislation going on now in the opioid crisis, Paul is either the lead attorney or working as a co-lead on the two major lawsuits there. But Paul lives in West Virginia. And when he got wind of this story, he said this is something he wanted to put his muscle behind, because local journalism needs to survive. And one of the ways it needs to survive is getting some of the ad revenues back that are, some say, being exploited by these tech giants, making 70% plus of the local ad revenue in each market we serve through the content that we create. I don't know where you sit on this story, but it is groundbreaking. And this is just the beginning. So join me, won't you, for the next 30 minutes as I go one-on-two with Lee Wolverton of HD Media and Paul T. Farrell, lead counsel, as they take on the tech giants Google and Facebook. Well, I'd like to welcome Paul and Lee to E&P Reports. Paul, you're not a stranger to litigation at all. I checked out your background. You're pretty involved right now in the opioid legislation going on, correct, sir?
Yes, sir. The national opioid litigation is still proceeding pretty aggressively. You're
the lead counsel on one major docketed case. You're the co-lead on another. And you've been getting a lot of attention on that. Lee Wolverton, Lee, you and I go back. You were with Morris newspapers back in Amarillo when I was working for Billy Morris as a consultant. And you've made the rounds, and now you find yourself in West Virginia. Been there for 1 year, am I correct, Lee?
Yeah, arrived here January 20th last year.
So how did this all start, this lawsuit? Whose idea was it originally, and how did it propagate? Lee, why don't you start right there?
Well, Doug Reynolds, the managing partner of the company, and I texted him one morning, a Friday morning, after the latest development in Australia. I can't recall exactly what was going on at the time. This was back, I believe, in August, and said that basically that if we wanted to save our newspaper, we needed to save the industry, and we needed to address this problem. And Doug called me within seconds, and we began the discussions. And so this was Doug's idea. I talked with Dave Shavern at the News Media Alliance, researched what was going on there and with America's newspapers. And then Doug and I met here in my office, and I shared with him, here's what's happening out there. And Doug said that he didn't have any faith in the legislative process, and he thought that what we needed to do was pursue an antitrust claim. And that led us to a discussion with Robert Fitzsimmons, Clayton, and Rocky Fitzsimmons. And they studied it for, I think, about 3 months before Clayton called us back and said he thought we had something. And from there, they've assembled an outstanding team of lawyers. Paul, when we were talking about his presentation of this, during a discussion, one of the Zoom calls that we've had, and it was a very clear, cogent. A lot of people really understood it when Paul laid it out. So we're very confident in the legal team that we have. with the Fitzsimmons family, with Paul, with Robin Skeller. It's a great group. But that's how we got here.
We released the story on E&P First on Friday, a little after 3 o'clock Eastern time. And I'm assuming that both you gentlemen had a pretty quiet weekend with no one contacting you, nothing, both of you were laughing. I actually set up a Google alert system on my computer just to see if the story was going to propagate. And within 11 hours, it was everywhere. It was an amazing thing that this media company, family owned in West Virginia, has decided to take on the tech giants directly rather than waiting for all the bureaucracy to try to figure this thing out. So it was Australia that did it when that was the key that kind of got you guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think personally, this is something I've been talking about for years, not specifically about Google and Facebook, but about the fact that newspapers actually are drawing more eyes to what they produce,
Right.
but we're getting nothing for it. And that, I mean, basically that just struck me something was fundamentally wrong. And, you know, as I said to Gretchen, I mean, that was the model. You know, if you drove up readership, you drove up you made more money, you were able to hire more people, do more journalism, which is, of course, that's my personal interest. And suddenly we're drawing more and more and more, but we can't make money from it. So, you know, it's really just the idea that was wrong, something, you know, but fortunately, I think, you know, Doug Reynolds he's a very sharp guy, and he really listened when I outlined the concerns to him. And frankly, there's been a lot of people who haven't listened, you know.
All right, Paul, you're I love the quote in the story that we did at E&P when we did the interview with you, that you said, for one of the few times that a lawyer can wear a white hat here. So you're all in on this one. Am I right, sir?
Yes, sir. I'm all in.
And what is their philosophy behind it? What did you say when you got on that Zoom call that just got everybody behind you? What can I just hear what you're thinking or what it's all about? And as we take on, as I say we, because I'm part of this industry, as we go head to head with some of these enormous tech giants?
Yeah, I mean, my background's in medical malpractice. And so I started out as a defense lawyer and then went to be a plaintiff's lawyer. And, you know, one of the things that I learned very quickly is that when you first broach the topic of a medical malpractice case, people have immediate responses. So what's the one word that comes to mind when you think doctor? And most people will say hero. What's the one word that comes to mind when you think lawyer? And they say greed. So there's some barriers to we have to overcome. In the opioid cases, it very quickly turned on the messaging of 780 million pills were delivered into our state.
Yeah.
780. We only have 1.6 million people. Now, all of a sudden, what I've figured is that I can take my law license and I can achieve some social good out of it in my career. So when the next evolution came and it was presented to me what was going on with Google and Facebook in the newspaper industry, my initial reaction was, okay, Google, search engine, you know, they're advanced technology. They're doing, you know, wonders for the internet. Facebook, it brings families together. There's some initial reactions that we all get. So I started reading more and more about it, and it led me to the House Judiciary Report that was released in October of 2020. And when I read it, I was actually flabbergasted. I could not fathom that we allowed for so much power to be accumulated in this particular market share being held by Google. But then when I went on to read that they not only own the market share, they own the marketplace.
It's true.
And so this isn't a obstacle to entry into digital advertising. You know, this is a barrier. And so to expect that the newspaper industry is going to be able to compete for digital advertising in a marketplace owned, operated, and controlled by the number one user of the marketplace, it's why we have antitrust laws.
Well, there's no question that somewhere north of 70% of all local advertising revenues are being gobbled up by Google and Facebook, leaving 30% for everybody else to go after. But what is it about the newspaper industry? I'm curious, because this is your first foray into our industry. And it's interesting because we're hearing more and more and more that even the legislators that we provide a check to believe in the need for a free press. We have a bill in Congress right now, I'm sure you're aware of, called the Local Journal Sustainability Act, where we're just trying to get some tax credit for hiring journalists and give a tax credit to people that support local journalism or subscribe to a local newspaper. And I don't think you're going to find a lot of people in Washington, D.C. that are looking out for Google and Facebook right now. But do you understand that this goes beyond just tech giants and newspapers, but this is helping local journalism survive, sir? Is this?
Yeah, so that was one of the original projects that I undertook. Was intrinsically, we all understand we have to have freedom of the press, right? But what does that mean, and why do we have it? And it takes us all the way back, and I don't want to sound like that I'm too big of a nerd, but it takes us back to the formation of our country,
of course,
and the Federalist Papers. You know, Thomas Jefferson is very well quoted on this very thing. And what we have to be afraid of is in other democracies, in the histories, particularly in Europe, that a decline in the freedom of speech was replaced by something other than democracy. And so the very underpinnings of what it is that our democracy stands for, accountability, transparency. I mean, think back to all of the way that we've held our government accountable. And it usually leads into the news industry. And we are facing a very serious threat, not just to the freedom of the press, but the existence of the press.
Google and Facebook have thrown some cash at this industry over the past few years. I was chatting with Lee about that. They have started initiatives and funds and ways that they're throwing a few $100 million here and there to try to say that they're supporting the industry. They're going to throw that back in your face, right? I mean, isn't this what you're up against now? I mean, they have obviously seen this coming. Australia started it, right? There's lawsuits there, that legislation there that says Google and Facebook are going to have to pay for the content they don't create, but they curate. Are you prepared to make that battle as we go up the line?
So let me share something with you that is now public knowledge from the opioid litigation. The companies that were making these pills, they foresaw this confrontation back in about 2012. Really? There's actually public relations firms that are out there that you hire that can come in and prepare you for this. There's a pamphlet that they created called the Crisis Playbook. Wow. And it outlined for them how to handle these enormous public relations disasters. There is no doubt in my mind that when we get into discovery, we're going to find that Google and Facebook have anticipated this, they've seen it coming, and that they're prepared for it. And so when you take a couple $100 million and you spread it around as goodwill, when you're bringing in $140 billion a year in revenue, it's a pretty good business investment. Let me make this one point real clear. 1 million seconds is about 16 days. 1 billion seconds is more than 30 years. We're talking about $140 billion a year in revenue.
Lee, you're just one company sitting in West Virginia that's starting the ball rolling. What kind of reaction have you gotten locally? I'm sure this is already out locally, right? You guys put this in the paper. You guys put it up on your website that you're starting the.
We've not. We've left it to the rest to speak on this issue.
Seriously.
So the people that we're hearing from are across the industry. Really, what your story started, putting the press release out and then following up has generated the response. I know that I think we are hearing some things locally. I mean, friends and people we know I'm certainly hearing a lot from people I know in the industry, both people I know and people I don't. But the response has been really overwhelming.
Are you looking for other newspapers to come on board? Would that be something that the goal was or is right now, to have another group come in and join this crusade?
We're certainly hopeful. Yes. I mean, I think that it needs to be, I hope it's everybody. I hope every newspaper out there joins this fight. I hope I have been directing people to our legal team as I've heard from them. I hope everybody writes me and I'll direct them, or, Paul's here, you get right to him, but, or the Fitzsimmons law firm, whoever. But yeah, we want everybody there. It needs to be all of us. This is a fight for our industry. It's a fight for our very existence. So yeah, we're hopeful everybody joins us.
Have you heard from other associations and organizations?
Yeah. We've had conversations with America's newspapers.
Mm-hmm.
We had one with them. I can't remember when. Doug Reynolds and I had a conversation with them, and I think there have been some subsequent conversations between our legal team and Dean Ridings that I wasn't a part of. But we have talked to them. We know some people. A good friend of ours is on the board with them. So and some other people that we know here in West Virginia are involved with them.
Paul, what advice would you give right now to Lee or to anyone else that comes on board? These are two very powerful companies. Is there a downside if someone joins the fight right now? Is there something they should be watching out for? Is Lee going to have private detectives? I'm not trying to turn this into some kind of a spy novel or something, but can it get that rough?
As long as they bring me some bourbon and cigars, they're welcome to spy.
Yeah.
Well, we've had those conversations, throughout the opioid litigation. McKesson, Cardinal Health, and AmerisourceBergen, I think at some point in time, were number 7, 9, and 12 in the Fortune 500 rankings. So, we made a commitment, and that what we're going to do is be transparent. And when you're transparent and you have the right fight and you're a good person, good things happen. And so if they want to follow me around, they'll probably see me at a little league game, or they'll see me, walking the dogs. But I'm not particularly worried about that aspect of it. One of the things that I'm interested in is I believe in this case. I think it's the right thing to do, and I believe that the civil justice system has an important place in these types of cases. So you have the Department of Justice and 48 attorney generals that are, braving forward. And it's important for the newspapers to have a seat at the table, because when this trust, that's what they used to call them, when this trust is busted, there is going to be a realignment, and there is going to be a shift in the way this marketplace works. And the newspapers need to be at the front of the wave and have a voice in how it pans out. Otherwise, they risk being left behind. All that being said, there's always risk in litigation. There's always doubt. And, this is a very brave effort by HD Media. And so it's sort of like in the movie Braveheart, when Mel Gibson takes off charging, and then all of the soldiers come flowing in behind him. Well, in real life, if you were to go back and look at it, he was probably looking over his shoulder to see if anybody was following.
All right. So I remember the moment when I was, because Lee and I and my editor-in-chief, New Yang, were going back and forth. We were getting the press release ready. We were up and we were waiting for that magic moment. Lee kept saying to us, we got to wait till it's filed. And I'm assuming that was you, Paul. There was a moment where you physically filed. Where was it filed exactly initially? I know it's in the reporting we've done, but it was filed in West Virginia to start. Is that correct, sir?
That's right.
Now, so what's the timeline after that? How does this move, and how does this grow? Does it stay in West Virginia, or does this grow into other places? What would happen?
Yeah, so there is no real easy answer to that. Traditionally, what would happen is that you show up in front of your judge and you would get a scheduling order and the trial date, and that's probably not the course this is going to take. I anticipate that there'll be other newspaper publishers around the country that file likewise, and at some point in time, the federal system is going to figure out that there's efficiency in consolidating the discovery. And so the cases will be temporarily sent to one judge somewhere in the country for the handling of discovery. So by way of example, in the opioid cases, we had cases pending all throughout the Southern District of West Virginia, and they got consolidated in front of one judge. And the same thing happened in the Eastern District of Kentucky, the Southern District of Ohio, all over the country, to where eventually the joint panel on multi-district litigation had a hearing and decided it was best to consolidate them all in one place. And that's how those cases ended up in Cleveland, Ohio, in front of Judge Polster. So once that happens, if there's a consolidation, then they pick one case to go forward. They call it a bellwether. A wether is a type of sheep in Scotland, and the shepherd would tie a bell around the neck of the alpha male so that wherever they heard the bell go, the shepherd knew that's where the flock would go. So
I had no idea. Thank you for that. That's great.
So when these MDLs get formed, they pick a bellwether and they, basically start the discovery process to see how it goes. And then once discovery is had, the judge in Cleveland will send all of the cases back home for trial.
Really?
So I would anticipate that what would happen in this case is that there will be some movement where there is either some mass effect of litigation, and if there is, then they'll be consolidated somewhere in the country for discovery, and then we'll have a clash of titans of some of the best legal minds in the country. We'll spend a bunch of money, and we'll show them ours, and they'll show us theirs, and then we'll see what happens.
Timeline, how long? What do you think? Are we talking years, decades, months? How long do you think this is going to be percolating?
Well, traditionally, I would say that it would take years.
Okay.
However, in this instance, I think there's a couple of other dynamic forces that are at play. The fight that's going on in Australia right now cannot be understated. It is the bully flexing. And when Congress goes beyond just the House Judiciary Report, making recommendations to the Antitrust Division of the Department of Justice, and they actually consider legislative reform, I think what you're going to see is the judicial branch, the legislative branch, and hopefully the executive branch all coming together and exerting some type of democratic influence to find a solution that will sustain newspapers in this new marketplace.
So the timing couldn't be better in a way because of the Local Journalism Sustainability Act. And that, again, because that planted the seed in our representatives to watch out for this desperate need to keep local journalism alive. And they seem to be behind it. Just as one guy who's, cruising all the cable channels, no one seems to be a friend of Google and Facebook right now. You've got to agree. There's no one in Congress going, well, what great guys. It's just amazing because it's either side you are politically, there's still some animus there. And then this starts from a grassroots level. There might be a way that this could be taken care of at a as what you're saying is legislatively without having to go into court. Is that what you're saying, that this could all settle in a different way?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the history of the major antitrust actions throughout our country's history, they were really precipitated by some social event, right? So, leading up to World War I or the Great Depression or the stock market crash or World War II, there was always some external social pressure that caused everybody to wake up and pay attention that too much wealth had been aggregated in too few hands. And so what I'm hoping is that the realization that we are currently fostering news deserts across the country, and that those news deserts are spreading, that will be enough to capture the attention of those in our federal government to do something to preserve the free press, the free and diverse press. Now that's an important part, not just a free press, but a diverse press.
Of course.
And so in order to have the viewpoints of all, that's what has been so great about our country, is that we can have fierce debates, but we still end up in the right place at the end of the day. And without those voices being heard, then I think that we face a significant jeopardy to our democracy.
Lee, your phone has been ringing, I'm assuming, from other newspaper groups asking you what they can do to support you or join you. Can you give a general message now to any, we get thousands of people viewing this and listening to this. They're mostly newspaper executives and other news publishers. What message, if I were to say, hey, Lee, what's going on? What can I do? What would you say?
Well, what I have been doing is directing them to the Fitzsimmons law firm, to Clayton Fitzsimmons there, and advising them to take the next step and talk to them. I think that we have the best possible representation. I don't think it's possible for us to have a better legal team behind us. I shared this with our guys when I read the complaint. I regarded that as the most important document I've read in 34 years in the newspaper industry. So I would encourage everybody, read that complaint. And then certainly reach out to me. My email and phone number is on the press release. Of course, I'm forwarding that information to Clayton and the legal team. I'm not a lawyer, so those are the people with whom you need to speak. They've put a lot of time and energy and effort into this. That's why this document, I think, turned out the way that it did. It's extremely informative. It's extremely important. It's right on point. I've studied and paid very close attention to these things for a long time, and it was still yet what these guys put together was I thought was just breathtaking. So that's what I'd encourage everybody to do. First, read it. If you don't have a copy, you can certainly ask me, and I'll email me, and I'll send you a copy of the complaint. And then that's what I would next do, is direct you to our legal team.
Paul, what would you add to that? What would you say to any news publisher now that wants to join the fight and believes strongly in how, as you would say, in breaking up this trust? What would you say to them?
Well, first of all, that's a big compliment from Lee. We when we drafted the complaint, we tried to build a story, and I reminded our legal team, this isn't just any old plaintiff we're representing. We're representing newspapers. And by God, we got to get it right. We better be factually accurate, and we better be compelling. So, what we've attempted to do is we've attempted to change history. And in the newspaper industry, the newspaper has been chronicling history since the beginning of our country. And now it's time for them to be part of it.
Well said. How does someone get a hold of you, Paul? Your email address is pretty easy, isn't it?
Yes, sir. It's pretty easy. I'm not too hard to find. You can Google me.
Yes, and you'll see that the first return is you ran for president. You've done much more, sir, but Wikipedia just started right off with that. But go ahead. It's Paul at Farrell.law, correct?
Yes, sir.
And Lee, your email address one more time.
It's L Wolverton, LWOLVERTON, like the song, like Wolverton Mountain. If you ever heard that song. L Wolverton at hdmediallc.com.
There you go. Gentlemen, this is a moving story. We're just at the beginning of this. And I want to thank both of you for your faith in Editor and Publisher Magazine, allowing us to have these exclusive interviews, and of course, allowing us to release the story. Lee, your faith in us, I really do appreciate that. Thank you.
You're a widely respected publication. I've been reading you ever since I broke into newspapers. Every publisher I know, an editor I know is an ardent reader. So it's a great publication, and you have done wonders there to reestablish its luster. So we thank you for all the great work you've done. It's important for our industry to have a trade journal like yours that, as you say, it's the Bible of the industry, and it truly is. It's widely respected, and we're very appreciative. We're very glad you're there.
Hashtag blushing. Thank you very, very much. Gentlemen, we're going to be back in touch with you. The industry needs both of you. Wear a mask, stay healthy, please, because we got a moving story here. And I thank you for your valuable time.
Thank you.